You've said that the origin for you wanting to be a filmmaker and tell stories was from the fact that you didn't like your own personal story. What didn't you like?
I mean, I think it's just you know something that a lot of people deal with, especially at a young age. Not not feeling like um, you're whether that you call it self esteem issues or whatever, feeling like you fit in and feeling like people understand you and stuff like that. And yeah, so I mean that was a very young thought. That was something at 19 that sort of hit me and was why I first went up to LA from San Diego. I was down there, dropped out of school, was working on a fishing boat, and then was like, oh man, filmmaking looks cool. So I moved to LA, interested in starting that journey. And I didn't really, uh, I didn't really know where that would lead me. I didn't really know where to start. I didn't know anybody. So while I took some acting classes and thought about film school, I didn't really pursue it wholeheartedly until much later. And then I started to live that life. Started to do those things and maybe create what I would consider an interesting story for myself and the things that I did, and sort of following my heart down that path, and eventually came back to filmmaking 15 years later. After serving in the military and playing football and doing all these other things. So I think at that point too, I understood, I had a better grasp of what is a compelling story, and how do you tell them, how important are they to that they how important is it that they are told, and sort of very much developed my filmmaker brain just from living life a little bit.
So you were a Green Beret and you played football at Texas and then
Yeah,
for the Seattle Seahawks. So
right.
you've lived at this cross section between sports and military. How did these experiences in being able to identify both as a veteran and as an athlete influence the direction of your movie MVP?
I mean, it had everything to do with it. It was like, though, even the words written on the page were the voices of veterans and athletes I'd met over the years and spent time with. So it was more transcribing than creating a script. And then from a directorial standpoint, uh, it's just understanding the story that I wanted to tell, first of all, which was not the story that Hollywood typically tells, as far as our experiences with post traumatic stress, what we struggle with, why it can be harder once you come home, even if you've seen some pretty traumatic stuff at war. And similarly with the athlete side, being in that locker room, playing football for 5 years, and understanding the pressure that goes with that, and how much these athletes pour everything into that from a very young age. They're 8 years old and they're like, this is all I want to do. I want to be the best and I want to play in the pros. And then 15, 20 years later, whatever it is, and it ends, they get cut. It's over. There's no backup plan. There never was. Because if there was a backup plan, they'd be second guessing themselves and wouldn't have the confidence to get to the level they got to. And all of a sudden you're still in your 20s, maybe 30s if you're lucky, and it's like you feel like you've peaked and you'll never be great again. And that's not the way it should work. It's not how it is for most anything else. And vets and athletes share that, the struggle with losing the team and the camaraderie and the mission and the identity that goes with that uniform, and kind of being stripped of that and not knowing who you are now, or who you ever were, really, because to everybody else you were an athlete or a vet. And it's not true. You're just human beings that made that choice. So that was what that movie was all about, both of those sides coming to grips with that and understanding, trying to understand that, like, this is just a chapter, and it's an awesome one, but I can move on and I can do other things, and it's okay. It's I should remember it and be proud of it, but I'm not, um, I'm not just that, you know, I'm so much more.
Yeah, I think to a large degree, we have a romanticized view of sports in the military, especially when it's in the media and entertainment industries. And
Right.
I think MVP definitely tries to combat this, and it does it in a very successful way. And I also believe that creative work and expressing ourselves in a more artistic manner, especially for people who are heavily involved in sports or the military, aren't necessarily able to tap into those that side of themselves as much. What did you learn about yourself personally from the entire process of creating the movie?
I learned that. Well, I learned that while have strong opinions and ideas about what right looks like, it's not always the best way or the easiest way or the path of least resistance. You know, it's not always the way that makes sense for everybody else. And learning to be more collaborative. You know, and it's ironic because of course you learn teamwork in the military and you learn it in sports, but when it comes to filmmaking, you know, you kind of need one voice to follow, or everybody gets confused about, you know, who's in charge, A, but also what is the actual vision for this movie and this scene and this character and whatever. Um, so while learning to maintain that voice and be that leader, but also be very open to other people's input and opinions, and kind of let people do their job as well, which is hard. It's hard for me. I'm very like, I want to double and triple check everything, even when it's people I trust. I'm just like, I need to see it for myself, you know, and that can be challenging, but it's important, you know. Mo McRae, who plays the Will Phillips character in MVP, you know, he calls it collective genius, and you don't always agree, you don't always get along all the time, and uh, you know, there's contention and stress, and it's long days, and especially on a low budget, it's hard, you know, and people are sacrificing a lot, and you got to recognize that everybody there is sacrificing, and they're all trying to help your vision come to life, you know. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, especially when there's no money, because they ain't doing it for the money. So, yeah, I think that that's something that you know that is learned, and still it's a struggle, but I think I'm getting better at it. But yeah, it's important. It's important.
What was the biggest challenge in making the movie?
COVID probably was the biggest challenge, with as far as production goes. Otherwise, like, you know, when you're a low budget film, and even with very talented people that were assisting, you know, both in front of and behind the camera, if you don't have a big splashy star in the film, it's hard to sell. It's hard to get out there. So the challenge was making something marketable that was also authentic to this story of, you know, merging vets and players, the organization that the genesis of the organization is what the film is, how it started, and it's based on a true story and real people. You know, there were certain things I didn't want to lose, like the authenticity on screen too. I cast all veterans to play those veteran roles. You know, every vet portrayed on screen is played by an actual vet, and then a lot of those athletes, you know, you recognize some of them if you're a sports fan, but they're playing themselves, and that's hard. You know, I mean, and they act some, but it's not like there's a lot of actors out there that work quite a bit more and are a lot more experienced. But I knew they wouldn't quite understand the world in the same way. So I didn't want to give that up. But when you don't want to give that up, you know, you're giving up potential marketability and saleability, um, and that's tough for distributors and studios to get wrap their head around, you know, because they're used to, well, it doesn't matter how good the movie is, you don't have, you know, an A-lister in it. It's like, okay, then I guess we'll see if somebody else is interested, you know. And we actually had some really huge names interested. We almost, you know, Sony almost distributed the film, which would have been amazing. Um, but it worked out exactly how it needed to. Getting that getting Film Rise behind it, and eventually selling it to, or licensing it anyway, to Showtime, and so now with their partnership with Paramount Plus, and then Amazon Prime and Apple TV and others have jumped in, and you're able to see the movie there as well. Pretty incredible considering the humble beginnings and the the very humble budget in which we made the film. It's done okay. It's done pretty damn well.
You were the writer, the producer, the casting agent, and you're also the main character in the movie. And you've also talked about, I've heard you say how you think being naive is one of your strengths. And I think it gets into this understanding of almost having a delusional confidence about getting something done. How do
Yeah.
you think this benefited you in taking this idea for a movie and executing on it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And there's definitely a fine line there with, look, there's a lot of delusion in Hollywood. There's a lot of people that, I think there's a difference between sort of like creative delusion and um, delusion or naivety in the sense of not letting yourself being psyched out, not looking at the odds and looking at the numbers and looking at, you know, why most people don't even try. If you don't go down that path, that's a good decision to make. When it comes to delusion of like, oh, like with our movie, we were so lucky to have Sylvester Stallone put his name on it, as an executive producer, and he hasn't really asked for anything. But like, for me to think on our budget that he was going to be in the movie, that's the kind of delusion that will get people stuck. They get in their own way, and they'll be like, no, this story is important and it deserves somebody like that that'll get it on the big screen and all. And I'm not saying that that's invalid. I'm just saying, good luck. You probably aren't going to ever make your movie then. So what's more important? Is it making the film, or is it making it exactly how you imagined in your dreams? Um, and that's just the reality. Like, that's what you have to let go of. Um, but staying naive to like the fact that 3% of movies make money, right? Most 97% of them never see a dollar. They don't. Most of them don't even get distribution. They don't really get out there. Um, and so, not psyching myself in that regard. Focusing all that energy on like, just make a really good movie, tell a great story, get the best people you can. And we had a lot of, to have Tom Arnold, come on and do this amazing cameo, and then obviously like Strahan and Howie Long and Jay Glazer and Tony Gonzalez and Randy Couture and all these people that are in the athlete world that are very popular, give their energy and their time. I mean, I had to pay them a little bit because that's the rules from the union, but they didn't ask for a penny more than than scale, which is very low, especially from what they're used to making. So it's like, it's awesome. Rich Eisen, to go on to be able to do that. And it was like, once we got the ball rolling and it was like, we're just making this thing and it's happening and here we go. You'd be surprised who's down. If they got the day free, if you can work around their schedule, they'll give you a few hours. They'll give you a day. Like, they'll do it if they believe in the mission. But if you're just like going to wait until you get, that delusion of like, I need to have all these big name people in it and whatever. If you've never made a movie before, like, good luck, man. I hope it happens for you, but the odds are not in your favor, and you got to like prove yourself first. You got to go out there, just make something, just go make stuff, make movies, make anything, to show that you can do it. And even if it's not great, then make another one. Screw it. It's the same thing with relationships. If it doesn't work out, find somebody else, move on. Because most of them don't, you know. But that's how you learn and that's how you grow. And this waiting around for the perfect moment, and like, oh, I wrote this character for whoever. And if I don't get them, then I'm not making the movie. Like, all right, then you're probably not going to make the movie.
Yeah, I think that goes to how you're saying how you had these very big athletes wanting to or agreeing to be in the movie. I think that just goes to the strength of the story and actually having a very strong mission behind that story and purpose rather than
Yeah.
just strictly entertainment. And I love how you said earlier how all the veterans in the movie are people who are actually ex-veterans. How important was it for getting more so into the creative side, allowing people like that who maybe didn't have an opportunity in their life to explore their creativity to give people like that an avenue to explore that creativity?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, first of all, I mean, you just said it. What drew people to it was the organization, was what Merging Vets and Players does for vets and athletes and who we're there for, the community we support. And then it was probably a very smart business strategy in retrospect. I wasn't thinking of it that way at the time, but just to cast those vets and athletes because they're connected so much to the organization and the story. Um, and then when it comes to opportunity, a lot of those guys, especially on the veteran side, had never acted. Well, that's not true. They were pursuing it, maybe taking classes, maybe worked on a student project or two. But this was like their first movie, first opportunity, first role, um, and they were so grateful to get it, and they were worked very hard at the characters, and they auditioned for them. They're sending in self tapes and all this stuff, and then I would tell them afterwards. I told them later. I'm like, look, um, you guys were awesome, and you know, I appreciate all the work you put into this character and memorizing these lines and doing that, whatever. But when we're on set on the day, I'm just like, this character is just you though, right? Like you don't have to. You can kind of say as long as you're getting across the same point, you can generally say whatever you want. And they're like, well, no, I like what you wrote. And I'm like, well, then you can say that too. I'm just letting you know this character is you. Like I tried to write this. I tried to write once I cast you. I rewrote the script in your voice as best as I could, but you know your voice better than anybody. So if there's something else, as long as it doesn't contradict the story or the scene, try it. Let's do that. Whatever you feel comfortable, because it's all like when Tony Gonzalez and Randy Couture are sharing their story, it's their story. They've told that story before at an MVP huddle, and that's why I know about it. So that's why I asked them just to tell their story. And it was scripted too, but they didn't, and they read their lines and did their best to sort of memorize it. But at the same time, their best performances, the cuts that we used, the takes that worked, were when they just kind of spoke from the heart, just kind of told their own story and just relaxed into themselves, which is hard to do. Playing yourself is probably the hardest character to play.
Yeah, there's such a raw, authentic feeling when watching the movie. And I think my favorite thing about the movie is there's such a humanizing effect to it, especially when you're having these big name athletes. And that scene with Tony Gonzalez is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie.
On the mat or on the basketball court?
On the mat, when he's
Yeah.
explaining how first year out of retirement, he's in Spain with his wife on vacation, and he's just like, I won't be great again. I
Mm-hmm.
peaked, and he feels lost. And it's so incredible because this guy's 17-year NFL career, one of the best tight ends of all time, Hall of Famer,
Yep.
and this person that we see as extraordinary, one of one, and he just humanizes himself with this very relatable story. And I mean, you've had a very interesting journey throughout your life. How you talked about earlier, you started in LA when you were 19 years old because that's when you first wanted to get into filmmaking, and then you joined the military at 24. Then you go on to play college football and go to college at almost 30, and then you sign with the Seahawks, and then back to filmmaking. And I feel like to give yourself the freedom and the permission to evolve like that as a person and go down these different paths, it's easier said than done. How do you think you were able to do it?
I think just somewhat quietly putting in the work before people even know this is something you're sort of dreaming about and interested in. Like, I think oftentimes, people have an idea and they'll start telling everybody, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And maybe they will. Maybe that's their way to hold themselves accountable. But I'll typically do some research and start working towards it, like with football, um, without telling a bunch of people this is something I'm planning on trying to do. I'm going to go try out for the Longhorns, when I get in school, and maybe tell one or two people that you trust, that are close with you, that'll give you advice and won't discourage you for the wrong reasons. Discourage you because they're jealous or they think you shouldn't go for it because they never would. Um, and just to see if you're actually into that thing, and also to kind of uh, see what sticks, see what makes sense, and see if like you enjoy the work, because life is, when you're pursuing dreams, especially competitive, lofty ones that are um, very hard to achieve, you better like the work to get there, because most of the time the work is the only reward you see. You know what I mean? So if you're so result oriented and to you it's not worth it unless you achieve the thing, better pick something you can achieve. And that's not my way. I like to go after things I don't think I can do, or I think maybe that's not true. I think there's a chance I could, but I know the odds are stacked against me, and I'm probably not built for this thing. I'm not the most talented person, and um, I'll listen a little bit to that voice in my head that's kind of negative and be like, all right, but what makes me happier than anything is proving that voice wrong, because it's not you; it's just a voice in your head. And so yeah, I think that's the you have to put the work in. You have to put the work in once people know about it, well before they do. Um, and you can't expect the scoreboard to read a certain thing at the end of the work. You know what I mean? Like you got to just focus on what you can control, and that's your effort and how much time you put in and your commitment, and almost like the oracles you speak out or seek out, like the people, the wise old owls, and the people you ask for advice and ask questions to, like finding those people, emailing, not being afraid to send a message. I mean, just you in this podcast, man, you slid into my DMs and just said, hey, I want you on the show. And I was honest. I was like, oh, I don't have a ton of time. I'm not sure, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, cool. Well, whenever you can, let me know. I'll make it happen. I'll make it work. And what is it? It's a week later and we made it work. So like,
Not
that's all
even.
it
I think it's
takes.
3 days later.
3 days later, all you got to do is, it feels like a week because I've been doing a million billion things, but all you all you got to do is just hang it out there. And if you're not fixated on that result, like if the answer would have been no, or if I just wouldn't have been able to make it work, and it's just cool, ask 100 more people. You'll find that person. You'll find the guy that'll have the time, and they'll be glad that they did it, like I am. So anyway, that's what it takes, though. You got to knock on the doors and make phone calls, and just don't be attached to the result, and don't be so worried about, you're going to get no a lot. And if you get no a lot, and and uh, and those yeses just mean that much more to you, uh, it's a good feeling, and you kind of know you're on the right track. And I don't know, I'm the kind of person that if things are happening too easy, something's not right. It's either I got to up the stakes or there's something fishy going on here. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah, I always think that if you're in it for the results, you're probably going to be losing to somebody who's just in it for the work, and
Yeah.
maybe results will come down the line. My last question for you is, one of my favorite sayings is, don't ask for a seat, build a table. And I feel like that's exactly what you've done with MVP and the movie. What do you think you want to build next?
I definitely want to keep doing this, and telling stories. I do enjoy that, and it's not because I don't like my own story anymore. It's just because I think it's important to do. Um, and it can change people's lives. You know, a lot of stories that I've seen and read and whatever have like shifted my thinking on something or made me uh, try a different path that maybe changed my entire life. Maybe it was just a story somebody told me, you know, about somebody or whatever. Like that's the one thing. I don't know who said that, but that's sort of the one thing that sets us apart from the other species. I think, you know, is that we have a history. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we just don't understand how other animals communicate history in that way. But we tell stories, you know, and we make things. And I think that's I'm pretty addicted to that. This is the longest I've been at something and haven't sort of pivoted. So, and it's not that long. I've really only been at it about 8 years now. But yeah, this
I love
is,
how you think of that as not long as 8 years, because there's so many people who would think, oh, if
yeah,
I'm doing this for 2 years, that's a long time. But if you have that sort of
right.
long term
Well,
mindset, it's like I'm very
yes.
early in this game.
I mean, if it was 8 years and I still hadn't made anything, I probably would have pivoted a long time ago, right? But I started making stuff right away, even small stuff. It was just like, sure, I'll work on that. I'll go intern there. I'll read this. I'll start writing something. You know, that's the cool thing about storytelling. Anybody can do it. It doesn't matter what your physical or mental abilities are. You can do it. You know, you can create art in some way. Anybody can. That's all. Not everybody can, you know, play football. I get that. You know, not everybody can do a lot of things, but anybody can do that. Anybody can tell a story, and so if you have a hankering at all to do it, there's a lot of mediums in which you can do that. You don't have to make movies. You don't have to write books. You can do anything, you know. Then you should do it. It's good for us. I think it's part of who we are as people and what we need to do. So I don't know. I mean, little things have come up along the way. I ran 100 miles last year in Leadville, Colorado, which was awesome. The Leadville 100 trail race is an absolute beast. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, and I love it. But I don't want to be an ultra runner, you know. I like to challenge myself in different ways. But I think as far as a consistent part of me from now on, at some level, I think will be storytelling, and we'll see how that shifts. I've done some on the unscripted side, and of course with MVP and some other things, I'm working on some narrative projects as well. But yeah, right now I'm working on a 80th anniversary D-Day documentary. I was out there in Normandy for the anniversary, and we filmed for about 10 days there, and we're going to continue to collect these stories and these World War II vets. You know, the youngest one we met out there was 97, and the oldest one was 104, and there's not going to be any of them left in 10 years. You know, that's just the reality. So we gotta we gotta get these we gotta keep that legacy moving forward, and make sure that anybody that has ever wanted to tell their story that hasn't had the opportunity has that opportunity and has a platform to do it. And so that's something that's important to me right now as well. So that's a slight shift from what I was doing before. But yeah, I'll keep telling stories. I'm pretty sure about that.
Nate, where can people go to find you and support your work with MVP?
Yeah, on just for me at Nate Boyer 37 on social media, pretty much across the board. I do have a website, nateboyer.org as well. If you'd like to reach out, connect with me, please do. But for emerging vets and players, MVP, our website is vetsandplayers.org. And, you know, we've got chapters all over the country. I would encourage you first, anybody out there, go watch the movie. Please watch the movie. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the organization. And I think it's a good movie too. I'm a little biased, but you know, I think we did a good job. I didn't like it for a very long time until the first time I saw it in a theater was with 350 veterans and athletes. And that's the first time I got emotional because I could feel the emotion in the room. And after that, I walked out and I was like, all right, it's a good movie. I did a good job. We did a good job, you know, but it took a while through the whole edit. I was like, man, I screwed it up. I didn't do it right. It could have been better. It could have been so much better. And it probably could. Everything could be better. But I think we did a great job. So go watch the movie. Go to vetsandplayers.org. On social media, we're at Merging Vets and Players on Instagram, and I believe at Vets and Players on X and some other socials as well. But yeah, engage with us. We've got 8 chapters around the country in LA, Vegas, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, Seattle, Dallas, and Phoenix. And now we're more recently starting to operate in Austin, Nashville, Jacksonville, the DC area, and hopefully soon to be New Orleans. We'd like to get something going out there for the Super Bowl this next year. So we'll see. But definitely connect with us.
Nate, I appreciate you for coming on the Outworker.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you, brother.